So this is a true story. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mum was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of the hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mum had a window open in her room, which was directly behind her bed. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was in the doorway of my mum's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mum and wake her up. In the 3 to 4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the door frame and there was a man standing by the door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mum proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone eventually called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that the front door was unlocked, which led them to believe that the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mum swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. I'm going to start this story off by saying that at the time this happened, I was a 19-year-old sophomore in college. I was living on campus in the apartment-style dorms, and my college wasn't exactly in the nicest part of the city, so I'd usually drive a little bit further to the grocery store, so I could be in a little bit of a safer area. The night this happened, I was going to cook dinner, and realised I didn't have some of the spices I needed. Normally, I would have just said forget it, and made something else, but the meat had already been thawed for a day or so, and I needed to cook it. I debated going to the Walmart that was just 2 minutes away from my campus, but it was getting a bit late, and I didn't want to go there by myself in the dark. That Walmart is right next to a major highway, and being a girl by herself, I felt uncomfortable risking it, so instead I went to the Walmart that was about 20 minutes away, a few towns over. I got to the Walmart and brought my spices along with a few other things, and checked out. No problem. By the time I was done, it was completely dark out. I was back at the driver's side of my car and putting a few bags in the passenger seat, when I noticed a woman. She was an African American, maybe in her mid-50s, looking at the back of my car. At the time, I drove a really old car, and if you knew your cars, it would be surprising that it was still running. I've had a few people in the past, older men usually, look at or come up to me and ask me about my car. I figured that this is what this lady was doing, and I kind of ignored it until out of the corner of my eye, I saw her come around my car and stop about 2 feet behind where I was standing. I was parked next to a parking lot median, so it's not like she was getting into the car next to me. "Excuse me," she said. I turned around saying yes, kind of prepared to answer, "What year or model is your car?" "My church has given out leftover boxes from our food drive to people in need. Could I give you one? We have them in our car over there." This immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I mean, she had just seen me put my groceries into my car. Why would I need something else if I just went shopping? And also, the churches and food pantries around my college were usually cleaned out after they'd had their shopping days, for the people who really had to rely on things such as food drives. There was hardly, if ever anything, that was just left over. I had watched enough Criminal Minds and read enough Facebook posts to know that this felt like a human trafficking lure. I stuttered over my words a bit, trying to figure out exactly what to say. But I finally got out, "Oh, thank you. I'm good. I'd like to see it go to someone who could really use it." I felt like that was an okay response if she really was handing out boxes. "Are you sure? They are just right over here in my car," she said, taking a step and making the gap between us a little smaller. I was panicking as she stepped closer. I tried nonchalantly to put my hand into my bag and look for the small pocket knife my dad had given me. My mind was racing as I tried to find the knife, but also to try and keep my face looking calm and not suspicious. I repeated to her that I was good, and the box of food should go to somebody who could really use it. She finally seemed to let up, saying okay, have a good night and God bless you, and all of that. I told her to have a good night as well. Then as soon as her back was turned, I got into my car and locked all of the doors. As I pulled out of my parking spot, I noticed that the car she was walking to had 3 large men inside, standing at the trunk of the car. They were barely illuminated by the parking lot lights, but I think it was an early 2000s white Nissan. As I tried to go down the parking lot aisles as fast as I could, I saw the men looking at the back of my car, just like the woman had. I then noticed where their eyes were shifted to. They were not looking at my car, they were looking at my license plate. Just as I got to the end of the aisle, waiting to turn, I saw 2 of the men get into the front seat, and the other man and the woman get into the back seat. Their car started, and they started to pull out too. I was having a full-blown panic attack now. Just a week before, my friend had posted something on Facebook, how 2 men followed her and her mother for a Walmart. Again, I'd watched enough crime shows to know that this wasn't painting a pretty picture. I finally got the opportunity to turn, but that car was coming up behind me. I made a quick decision to take a really odd way back to campus. I made a ton of turns and went through a lot of small streets instead of taking one of the 2 main roads. I don't think I saw the car again after I pulled out of the parking lot, but I was definitely not taking any risks. By the time I got back to my college, I had calmed down a little. I started to wonder, maybe you're overthinking this. Believe there are actually good people in the world, and I decided that if they were really giving out boxes of food, then hopefully it would go to somebody who needed it. This was back in 2013, when I was living in New York City as a 23-year-old. I was living with my best friend from college, on the west side, near Times Square in K-Town. I was going through some tough times back then, as I was unemployed at the time. I had a lot of time, so I would go on walks by myself to clear my head from time to time. One night, I was feeling especially depressed, so I decided to walk to K-Town to grab a drink by myself. I walked into a Korean bar and got some weird looks from the waiter, as I asked for a table by myself. After ordering a couple of soju bottles, I was feeling pretty drunk, so I decided to walk back home. However, as I was exiting the bar, this Korean guy followed me. He looked very normal, just like a nice Korean guy. He told me that he saw me drinking by myself at the bar, and that he would love to walk me home to make sure I got home safe. I politely declined. After all, my apartment was pretty close, but he insisted, and he looked so harmless that I decided to take him up on his offer. We walked like 10 minutes I think, and it was quite pleasant. We were both a little drunk, but I remember talking about all sorts of things, nothing personal. When we finally arrived at my apartment, I thanked him and wished him farewell. Now, my apartment was a 5-story walk-up, and there was a main door, where we needed a key to open to get into the building. I didn't think much of it, and inserted the key to open the door, and went in. The door takes a while to close shut, and it was my mistake for not checking before I went up the stairs. While I was approaching the 2nd floor, I heard someone grab the door from closing, and I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I literally got goosebumps all over my body, and I felt like I was in danger. As I started to pick up the pace, I heard the footsteps going faster up the stairs. I lived on the 5th floor, and I started to run up, clutching my keys in my hand. The guy started to run up the stairs as well, and I can literally hear him getting closer and closer. This all happened in a couple of seconds, but it felt so long. I finally got to my floor, and as I tried to open the door, I looked back and literally saw the guy's head on the staircase. I rushed to open the door, and I managed to close the door right in his face. My heart was beating so fast, and I didn't know what to do at this point. It was already 3 AM, and my roommate was asleep. Luckily, he didn't knock or anything, so I decided to just go to my room, and hope that he was gone. Around 7 AM, my roommate woke me up. She said that there is a man standing in front of our apartment door. My heart sank, and I explained the whole situation to her. And I went to the door and I screamed that we were going to call the police if he doesn't go home. I looked at the peephole, and he told me that he was only going home if I gave him my number. We then called the police and saw him being escorted out. My roommate had to go to work, so she left the apartment and called me a few minutes later. She told me that she saw the guy speaking to the police downstairs. Apparently he tried to lie to the officers that I'm his girlfriend, and we got into a fight. My roommate went up to them and explained to the officers that I do not have a boyfriend and that she doesn't know him at all. The police let him off with a warning. About 2 hours later, I hear a buzz from the main door downstairs. Maybe it's the police? Surely it can't be him again. I answered the intercom, and I was shook. It was him again. "Just give me your number and I'll go away," he said. I warned him that I was going to call the police again if he doesn't leave. A couple of minutes later, I heard ferocious knocking on my door. He must have gotten in when somebody was entering the building. I was so scared at this point, so I immediately called the police. Unfortunately, the guy ran away before the police got there. The worst part about this experience was my roommate and I were so scared to leave and come back to our apartment. I would have anxiety every time I come home, worried that I might see him in front of our apartment door. For about a week the police escorted us when we felt scared. I never saw him again, but it was one of the scariest moments of my life. So creepy stalker dude, let's not meet again.